Hello, hello, and welcome to the sixth episode of Criminal Profiling. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to compare two serial killers. Last week we did the BTK strangler Dennis Rader, and I had mentioned a couple of people who had a lot of similarities that I thought were kind of similar in ways that reminded me of the BTK in some ways. And one of them was Colonel Russell Williams, the commander of the largest Air Force base in Canada, in Trenton, Ontario, Canada. And so then I got to thinking, why not do a comparison? We've not done one yet, and there'll be a good chance for people to see just how powerful this system is when you're comparing two people. It kind of sticks right out like a sore thumb. And you also get a chance to see a chart with no time of birth, which would be our first chart there. So we have no houses. You remember in the planet is the actor, the sign that the planet is in is the role the actor is playing, and the house is the atmosphere, the stage setting where it all takes place. We won't know that with Colonel Russell Williams. We will not know that. But you're going to see just how powerful this system is, that we don't need to know that in order to eliminate suspects with all confidence. Okay? That's because the houses are always nice to have, but the primary energies that push a person to do whatever they're doing is not the houses anyway. It is actually the planet and the sign and the aspects made to the planets that give the energy in the first place. Where it happens, well, we can pretty much guess that ourselves in some cases, but it's not necessary for the elimination of suspects because we want that primary energy that's being reflected, for the crimes and whatnot. And that's not done by the houses. So we're still in pretty good order. The only difficulty there is that with such planets as the moon, because it moves so fast, we can only use the aspects made to the moon. Remember that the aspects, a Mercury square this or Mercury conjunct that, we can only use the aspects that are active for the entire 24 hours because we don't know what time he was born. So there's two aspects in Russell Williams' chart that I crossed out. They might be active, but I don't know, so I can't take that chance. So I throw them out. In practical work, because I'm so used to astrology, if it's absolutely necessary and to kind of look into that 24 hours in order to see something that I know is real, then I can do that. I've done that before, but it's very rare, and I don't think I've done that in criminal profiling. No, in the last 25 years, I've not had to do that with any criminal. I did that for a personal chart some, 30 some odd years ago, but it's very rare that I have to do that. So yeah, sixth episode. I'm going to try to get this fast for you. We're not going to do much of a bio. We're just going to kind of go through some similarities, and we're going to look into them, okay? So without further ado, if you're not familiar with these two guys, please watch documentaries on them both. You should already know them. You should already have a feel for them before we begin, right? And go to YouTube, check out Russell Williams. There's some excellent documentaries. Fifth Estate does an excellent one, just under an hour. That's a good one. Try to get a documentary that's professional and put a lot of money into it, so that way you're getting a lot of film footage, interviews and stuff. Very expensive, but they make for a better documentary. Okay, Dennis Rader. There's lots of documentaries on him too on YouTube. Just refresh yourselves and then come back and let's go. You ready? Let's do this. Okay. 3 minutes on the clock. I have to time this. I want to get through this really fast. Okay. First of all, regarding their childhood, there was no trauma in either of their childhoods. We know that's very common with serial killers to have a traumatic childhood. Neither of these guys had a traumatic childhood, contrary to popular belief or some people like misinformation out about Dennis Rader. We find after close inspection with his book out, he wrote it. He was able to put his own story out, just like we heard last week. So we know that there was no childhood trauma. Same with Russell Williams. Came from a broken home, but he was close to his father and his stepfather. Wasn't very traumatic. He's very private and doesn't talk about it, mind you. But there's no absolute trauma, known trauma with either of these guys. So childhood can be erased. Adolescence, as you remember from last week, big problem for Rader. That's where his paraphilia set in between the ages of 10 and 19. He began his sexuality. He was aroused by his by rope and bondage. He got that kind of what he turned to. And there was the incidents with his mother with the ring caught in the couch, and he identified pain and that expression of suffering and bondage, inability to get away from that instance. But we won't get back into that. But suffice it to say that, yeah, his paraphilia, his orgasmic conditioning for bondage, murder, strangulation, stuff like that, set in pretty early. And he didn't run around like many serial killers, torturing animals all the time. That was overblown as well. His grandmother didn't like cats, wanted him, and he offered to get rid of them. So he gave him an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, and he was hanging and strangling the cats and enjoying that. So there you go. He also bonded there with the features of what were around him at the time. Barns became very popular with his mind. It became prominent in his mind. Silos, for the barns, silos and trains. Remember? Those are the things that were there when his paraphilia was setting in, and he was bonding with that. And his rope, when he followed the teacher home after she berated him, he watched her probably undress through the window. He's tightening a rope. He orgasms, blah, blah, blah. This is everything is just being cemented in his adolescence. Okay? So that's Rader. So there was rope strangulation, voyeurism, possibly autoerotic asphyxiation, but I think he was just tying it around. I'm not sure if he put it around his own neck. I'm not really sure. Possible. Cross-dressing. I think he might have did that for more like role-playing later, so I don't get too much heavy into the cross-dressing thing, but whatever. For Williams, it's unknown. He's so private, man, this guy. So private. And when you watch those documentaries, you'll see what I mean by super private. He doesn't want to talk about his family. He doesn't want to talk about breakups. He doesn't want to talk about a lot of things. He doesn't even discuss things until they're happening, as we'll find later. Okay, for their schooling. Rader, not as focused as Williams, not as focused. He drops out of college with mediocre grades after approximately 1 year. He went to college for about a year, dropped out. He joins the Air Force for 4 years. Of course, Colonel Russell Williams was the commander of the Air Force. They both joined the Air Force. Interesting. Fair enough. We won't read too much into that later, as you'll see. So Rader later becomes more focused. He goes back to college, gets an associate's degree in electronics, and then he goes to Wichita University and graduates with a Bachelor of Arts degree in administration of justice. Now remember, when he did that, he graduated in 1979. When he went there, he was already murdering. He had already murdered. He was trying to hone his skills as a serial killer, and also for work, and maybe there was some attraction to that sort of thing. As we'll see, his mindset is really towards that anyway, so it's kind of fitting that he would take something like that. So I have my pages. I must have... Oh well. Anyway, so that's a bit about his schooling with Williams. Much more focused. He went to more elite schools, by the way. Montessori schools, elite schools, and that. Elite college, everything elite. His parents had a bit more money there, I think, maybe. And so he graduates college with a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics and political science. During these college years, he experienced a really painful breakup with a Japanese girl, and he doesn't have another girlfriend for 10 years, approximately between the ages of 20 and 30. We get that from his roommates, and particularly Jeff, who met and became best friends with Russell when they became college roommates. And there were 6 of them all together, including Williams. It's going to be tough keeping the Williams-Rader thing separated. But anyway, for Williams, yes. Between the ages of 20 and 30, no girlfriend? Okay. Those are generally pretty active years, so keep that in mind. Okay, so he's described by roommates as a controlling neat freak who folded his clothes just so. Extremely self-disciplined, never got intoxicated, did not party, was a penny pincher, frugal with money, hung up clothes precisely 1 inch apart. He was just very regimental even before he joined the force, okay? And became the commander of Canada's largest air force. He's already got that mindset, okay? And if he went out partying, he would have like 2 beers, is what I'm going by Jeff and a lot of this, his friend. Jeff said he would go out and have 2 beers, never really party hard, have some wings with him or something, and go home and he'd count how much money he spent. Very particular with his money, very penny pinching. So there he is. He's broken up with a girlfriend. He's in big heartache, but not talking about it. He develops a fixation on a movie called Top Gun during these college years, and he watches it incessantly. And then it becomes, well, you'll see, a big part of his life. In fact, he tells his college roommates that after college he's going to dump his degree that he's still going to get. He's going to finish the job, and then he's going to run to the Air Force. And they're like, "You're going to get the degree, then not use it, and join the Air Force because of Top Gun?" So he doesn't have a fixation on planes. Keep this in mind. Even though there is some literature I saw where he may have taken some flying lessons here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, he's not fixated on planes, so it wouldn't be one of our 100% words. That would be thrown out. There is no fixation on planes at all, or even Air Force. Okay, because we're talking about a movie here, Top Gun. And Top Gun inspired a lot of people to go out and join the Air Force. Their registrations went through the roof after that movie came out. That inspired so many people, especially in the States, I suppose, and in Canada. Russell was among them. Okay? All right. So he develops a fixation. Now, as Jeff says, he says here he's taking it too far, trying to live out the movie like a fantasy. Fantasy, right? Jeff felt that, and this is a quote also. He is really lost in a fantasy world here. And he's not alone. His roommates thought that too. He was just lost in this. He was just living out this fantasy. Now he's going to live out the fantasy. He's going to become Top Gun, win back the girl and all this. That's highly important. Later on, you'll see. Okay? So and here's one of the things. Now, he was a very serious dude. Very methodical, very logical, very serious. But he did have a odd, quirky sense of humor a little bit. He wasn't a very... Like, it wasn't a joke. He was not a joker by any means, okay? So let's not take this too far. One thing is ever mentioned about his sense of humor. I've never heard of his sense of humor ever being mentioned again, except for this one instance. He would break into a college roommate's room, hide in their closet, and wait for extensive periods of time sometime for them to come home, and then jump out at them at the opportune time and scare the crap out of them, right? So, but others reciprocated and did the same to him, and it became a thing among them. Okay, so some people read dark things into it, and one psychiatrist actually read a little bit dark in there and said that maybe that was going along with his stealth and stuff. He liked the stealth and sneaking up on people and overpowering them and stuff. Who knows? But Jeff said he didn't really read anything dark into that. Okay, so miscellaneous stuff here. As you know, Rader went to church regularly, blah, 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 took a corpse there, posed it, oh yes, and so on and so forth. He was an excellent handyman, by the way, his daughter said. His daughter's so wonderful. If you can, get her book. She did a book on her dad. A lot of people are giving her a hard time, I understand, on Twitter, she said. That's very sad. Claiming they know her dad better than she does. That's very sad, actually. She's a wonderful woman, actually. I should check her out on YouTube. She's very straight out. You can tell she's just a no-bull person, so she's great to get information from. Clean source. That's rare for us. We can't take clean sources from anybody as profilers. We can listen to a criminal on TV talk about some stuff or embellish his crimes, but we have to take it with a grain of salt. He might be embellishing, might be lying. We don't know for sure. And when it comes to law enforcement, they're about as truthful as criminals. They often do not tell the truth. They often twist things. They often force people into guilt during interrogations. Okay, that's just a fact. When you're getting into true crime and you're coming in with a clean slate, you don't come in. You can't be a profiler and be a bigot. You can't be a profiler and be a racist. You can't be a profiler and be religious. Those things will taint your vision. You leave your religion at the door. You leave your bigotry at the door. You leave everything at the door if you can, and you start with nothing so that you can see everything. Hopefully, as much as possible. You have to see in all the rooms. You have to investigate all the rooms. Tear all the rooms down, see in all the rooms at once. There can't be any locked doors, okay, of your mind or anything. You have to be completely open, just as an aside. Okay? So he's an excellent handyman. He's good with about everything, Rader. His daughter says, with electronics and, well, he went to school for that. Handyman, building things, the tree house. Many people have seen the tree house. Very meticulous work there. Big tree house. Uses telephone poles to hold it up. Holy mackerel. Pretty nice. And no, he didn't hide evidence in there, as also was put out as misinformation. See what I mean? There's tons of misinformation. As a profiler, you don't believe anybody. Totally. Totally. You have to take out what you know to be true and which you hope, and which seems most likely to be true. Okay. For Williams, he was a dedicated jogger, early on. He liked photography, taking especially landscape and bird pictures. Thanks, Jeff, for that information. Jeff is another really honest guy. Did you see him on the documentaries? I like people like that. You can trust what they say. You can see, not right through them, but they ooze that innocence and just straight out nice people. Rader's daughter, he raised his family obviously really well, didn't he? For a serial killer, no question. His daughter is a really nice person. I like him. I like her. And I like Jeff as a best friend of Russell Williams. Great, good people. Check them out. So, and they're so obvious, you know. So I like that. So he liked photography. Interesting. Come back to that. He becomes interested in women's clothing approximately in his early 20s. Interesting. Okay, that's Williams. So not much there, but just a little tidbit about them. The photography thing is pretty important, right? Okay, for Williams, because that's going to come into it for these guys. So we're already seeing that Dennis Rader, if you remember from last week, he's a fantasizer. Big time into fantasy. Role-playing and stuff and fantasy with the bondage and stuff like that. He's a fantasizer. He's a fantasy murderer. We're going to come into that. Well, guess who else is into fantasy? Russell Williams, as we're finding out. Top Gun. You know, he's actually, a movie has him throwing away his whole career and going to the Air Force. And he does a great job of it. As you can see, he's very dedicated. Okay. For employment, we have Rader. Now, so schooling, Williams wins the day. He's much more focused in the schooling, does a much better job. He's much more focused. Now, let's pull up the charts right away because we're just doing comparison. I want to show you what I mean by focused and maybe not so focused. Okay, now if we look at the two charts here, Dennis Rader has Mercury square Saturn. And Saturn is steadfast, solid, helps to keep the focus, right? He has the sun opposite Jupiter, though. That kind of disturbs the focus a little bit. It plays on his narcissism. He goes too far, back, forth. He's not as focused. There's a bit of unfocus. He's also got Mercury opposite Jupiter and opposite Neptune. Opposite Neptune, he's actually self-deluded a little bit. So he's a bit self-deluded. And you can see he's taking courses in university so he can become a better serial killer. He flip-flopped around a little bit more. He's not Williams, who has got his eye on the target. I want this, I got it. I want that, I got it. But boom, I'll get my degree over here, then I'll throw it away. Then I want this, I'll become Top Gun. And he does both. So Russell Williams has Mercury conjunct Saturn, not square Saturn. Dennis Rader had Mercury square Saturn. Russell Williams has Mercury conjunct Saturn. So the two are working much more better together. There's no friction, right? The square Saturn, if you had a ruler, Mercury square Saturn would make it, you're still going to get to the 12th inch, but there's a bit of a warp in your ruler. Whereas Russell will get to the 12th inch straight and level, right? With no major self. He's also got the sun conjunct Jupiter, which is more focus. So you can see this guy has high potential, intelligent, blah, blah, blah. Just as an aside, we're going to come back to those planets because they play some of the biggest roles in their whole life. Okay. So for employment, we have Rader doing the... we have Rader. He's described as a hard ass by his daughter, by the way. Rader was Russell Williams was much more lenient. He worked for IGA Foods. I used to shop there with my mom when I was young. His mom worked there as a bookkeeper. He worked in the meat department. Later, he worked for about a year as an outdoor supply company. Later still, he got a lengthy employment with ADT Security Services. I think his daughter said he started in 1974. So he started at that security place at the time he started murdering. I think he did all his murders while he was with that security place, potentially. I'm not sure. I think he did all his murders there. And one thing about that is that he had the company truck. So when he was parking in places, nobody thought anything of it because it's a company truck. They thought somebody was just getting a security system put in. Meanwhile, he could be casing houses, going in, breaking in, doing whatever, getting the layout of a house that he set up the security for. Who knows, right? Then he did a short stint as a census field operations supervisor. Then he went on to become a compliance officer and dog catcher, which many people know, in Wichita until his arrest in 2005. He was a hard ass. He was hard on people, man. Right? He was measuring people's grass. He was like really strict on people. Not very nice, but strict, militant. Okay? With Williams, as we know, he graduates, probably with honors. In 1987, he joins the military, Air Force, just like he said he was going to do. Top Gun. I'm going to be a Top Gun guy. In 1990, he earns his wings. 1991, promoted to captain in the air. He also marries in 1991 in Winnipeg, Canada, where he's a flight instructor for the Air Force, right? And his best friend, Jeff, of course, remember he didn't have a girlfriend between 20 and 30? Well, all of a sudden, he's asking Jeff to be his best man. He goes, okay, sure. I didn't even know he had a girlfriend. That's how private this dude is, okay? Just as a heads up. 1999, promoted to major. 2004, promoted to lieutenant colonel. 2007, promoted to base commander. That's how many people know him as the base commander. The commander of the biggest Air Force in Canada. He gets that in 2007. He is now Top Gun, literally. But he didn't go for the fighter jets like Tom Cruise. He went for passenger jets, and he was flying around passengers like the Queen. I think he flew Prince Philip, and also the Prime Minister at the time, was it Chrétien or something like that, I believe. But, so yeah, he's doing stuff like that. So he's still Top Gun. He made it to the top. He's commander. Okay? So now, that shows his focus. As we already seen his focus, Mercury conjunct Saturn, Sun conjunct Jupiter. Rader, a little more flip-floppy, all over the place. Mercury square Saturn, Sun opposite Jupiter, Mercury opposite Jupiter, Mercury opposite Neptune. Mercury opposite Neptune is self-deluded, right? Remember from last week? Hopefully you watched last week before you watch this one. You should watch the last episode of BTK so you can follow this one closer, right? Now, for their mentality, just general mentality, daughter calls him a strict guy at home. He was pretty strict. She also said he was a badass and a bit of a bit controlling, right? A bit controlling guy. She called him a control freak and also controlling. So that is also a Mercury square Saturn. That's a control freak. Saturn is restriction, remember. Everything restrictive. Rope, bondage, held captive, holding on to something. Mementos, just holding on to things, right? Rigid, right? That's Saturn as a planet. Okay? So, here we go. Here's Rader's mental mind. You ready for this? You might even want to write this down. I don't know. Hopefully it's up there as I speak. Who knows? Meticulous, logical, conservative, methodical, serious, structured, and rational. Who? Also a bit of narcissism in there, as we know from last week. Contacted medium, please. That's what his narcissism actually went too far. You know, because he has that. Narcissism is, as from last week, you'll remember, the Sun and Jupiter kind of rule narcissism, and you kind of look for that. And in Rader's case, we had both the Sun and Jupiter in opposition, so they're actually together anyway. So that was an easy find. So, but he goes too far. Like that last year, before he was captured, he kept communicating with police all over. He was going communications crazy, putting out cereal boxes with dolls in them and stuff like all kinds of codes and just way too over the top, right? Williams ain't like that. Much more controlled and reserved and in control of his you'll see he's narcissistic also. So, meticulous, logical, conservative, methodical, serious, structured, rational. Here's Williams. Meticulous, logical, conservative, methodical, serious, structured, rational. Exactly the same traits for both of them. They both have the same mental mind. That's just why I'm comparing them. And so you can see why. The mental mind is Mercury. Mercury is the only planet that rules the mental mind. That's all communications, remember? Morse code, drawing. It doesn't matter how you're trying to communicate. Sign language, winking. It's all communications. And however you're trying to communicate, that's Mercury. So you can always learn a lot about a person through Mercury. So here we have meticulous, logical, conservative. So what does Williams have? He has Mercury conjunct Saturn. Remember, Rader had Mercury square Saturn. Williams has Mercury conjunct Saturn. They are working much better together. Remember, squares are negative. They're active negative. And so as the ruler, there's a bit of a warp in that square. With Williams, with the conjunction, perfectly straight. Ruler to get to that 12. So his mental mind, is a little more methodical. He's got a better methodology. He's more logical. He's perhaps more, I don't know about more conservative, but he's definitely more methodical. He's better at it. Okay? He's also the commander of the Air Force, so it kind of shows. Where Rader has Mercury square Saturn. Okay? Not quite as clean. Say, so he's not as efficient and, right? But they're exactly the same. So there you go. That's one that just jumps right out at us. That plays a huge role in both of their lives, how they do their crimes, everything, staking out the houses, right? So here's how he's described by people who know him: unusually calm, very logical, very rational, able to produce good quality staff work in fairly short time, a valued commodity in the force. That was by the retired commander who helped select him to take over his position as commander, right? So we can kind of rely on that, because how else can you become a commander? Not just being by someone's best friend. You can't be some joker all over the place and be the commander of Canada's largest air force. So, seen by co-workers and the retired commander also as being a good leader, good with administration, media, and public. He's the total package. Again, Mercury conjunct Saturn helps him a lot. But he's also got the Sun conjunct Jupiter. Jupiter is the executive planet. Remember, we talked a lot about Jupiter when it came to Epstein and Maxwell, right? In the second and third episodes. Jupiter is that higher functioning than just Mercury, right? It's like the executive and stuff like that. So here we have Sun conjunct Jupiter. So here's a guy who is able to put on some optimism. Even though he's very serious, he actually gives him more flexibility, yet it's clean. It's a conjunction. So this is what puts him over the top. He's able to work on all the levels required as to be commander. He's popularly known by staff as being one of their best and brightest. Sun conjunct Jupiter, among other things. But I just want to get those things that confirm what we're looking for, right? You don't want to go off looking for other stuff, because you can sway and say, oh yeah, but he's also got this, and then you start to see things. Remember, you see what you want with astrology, because it's a universal language. So you really want to say, I want this, I need that methodicalness, I need that meticulous, logical, conservative, methodical, serious. Let's look at the meanings of Saturn. Ready? Conservative, methodical, rigid, frigid, prudent, heavy, logical, austere, quiet, serious, melancholy. You get the idea. And both of their mental minds are connected to that, and both of them are like that, exactly. One has more potency than the other. Williams has the edge because of the conjunctions. Rader loses the edge due to the square and the opposition. So it matches them perfectly as it should. If it didn't, we have a problem, right? If the date of birth is wrong, like what's going on, right? But nope, we're on the right track, right? It's pretty, it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's very obvious who's more logical, who's got the better logic, right? Okay, so let's continue. So that's Mercury square Saturn, and that's your Saturn. Okay, so he possessed an air of loneliness. By some who knew him say that. Again, personality traits, they have to be confirmed. It's nice that we had it by the commander and a bunch of people on the base to use the meticulous, logical, conservative. Plus, we have his business. We have him being the commander of the Canada's largest air base. So we can kind of confirm that, yeah, he would be meticulous, logical, conservative, methodical. He would need these traits. He would need that Sun conjunct Jupiter to work in that sort of field, right? So we can use those personality traits as 100% because it has backup from work, backup from all sorts of areas. So a few people said he had an air of loneliness about him. Maybe it's that way. It's not obviously. Saturn is sadness. Saturn is also sadness, melancholy, as I just said. So Mercury, where's Russell? Mercury conjunct Saturn. Yeah, possible. Mercury square Saturn for Dennis Rader, a bit more agitated. He also worked very much alone. He lived two lives very much. Hopefully you've watched documentaries. His wife, his kids, nobody knew who the BTK was, and they wouldn't have known, okay? Because he's very well, he called it cubing. Remember last week? Compartmentalization. Okay. So they both might have had that air of loneliness for all I know. I think Rader was meaner with Mercury square Saturn. You're going to be a little nastier, I think. Colder, distant. Okay, so you have to be more careful with a guy with Mercury square Saturn than Mercury conjunct Saturn. Mercury square Saturn, this guy could be cold, maybe mean, cruel. Okay, there's cruelty involved. So that's the Mercury square Saturn. So with Russell, maybe it's just Mercury conjunct Saturn, there's air of loneliness, distancing, and he did spend most of his time alone. Rarely saw Jeff, his only friend, I think. There was never any other friend that I knew of that even Jeff knew of. It was just Jeff, his college roommate there. Okay. So, narcissistic. He's also narcissistic, though he did not communicate with media or police. Well, I guess not. You got Mercury conjunct Saturn, Sun conjunct Jupiter. This guy's in control of himself. He is very much in control of himself. As his workers said in one document, they never saw him mad or lose composure. This guy was the most composed guy ever. And they liked him. He was good at the job. He wasn't cruel. He was composed and professional, as a commander should be. But he wasn't cruel or overly like that, right? See, he was an all-around package and a breath of fresh air for the Air Force. Dennis Rader, known to be a strict, hard-ass, a bit cruel, a control freak, stuff like that. He's gone a bit far. He's out of control a bit. Mercury square Saturn as opposed to Mercury conjunct Saturn, okay? Sun opposite Jupiter. I'm picking out these things that are applying, right? As we go. Okay, let's continue. 31 minutes. Good, let's get this done. Type of murderer? Well, both of them are fantasy murderers. That's another thing. They are equally fantasy murderers. 100% fantasy. No preservatives. Okay. So they're fantasy, fetish driven. Fetish is a touchy word with me, especially when you're doing criminal profiling. Careful with fetish. They are fetish murderers, but fantasy I like. But these guys were fantasy murderers. Fetish, okay, there was some stuff in there, but stick to the fantasy, man. They've been described as fantasy too by their friends. Consumed with fantasy. The fantasy of becoming Top Gun and stuff like that by, his roommates. Living in a fantasy world, literally, and becoming Top Gun. So that's another thing. You would not use Air Force or planes for Russell Williams because he doesn't have an overabundance of interest in planes or Air Force. Right? That's not his thing, right? So you wouldn't even use that as a key word. It's very misleading. See, a person's job can be misleading. So everybody would think, oh, he was a commander of the Air Force. Well, look up Air Force. Look, what's that ruled by? You wouldn't even look it up. That'd be right in the garbage because that was not his focus. He wasn't consumed and had model planes growing up all over the place. Why is he an air commander? Because of Top Gun, a movie. And it also inspired a lot of other people. So you always take everything with a grain of salt, including the commander of the biggest Air Force in Canada. Top Gun, the movie. Who would have thunk, eh? But yeah, that's what we got. So no, we're not going to look up Air Force. We don't care about that. It has nothing to do with Russell Williams. It has nothing to do with the commander. Can you believe it? Amazing, eh? But true. Tom Cruise has more to do with his career than planes. Interesting. And his chosen career of college fits more with his Saturn, if you might have picked up on that from the old episodes of Epstein and math. You'll know he took economics. Mercury conjunct Saturn. So what about fantasy? What ruled fantasy? We took BTK last week. Do you remember? Fantasy driven. These guys are both fantasy murderers. So fantasy is by the element water. If you remember the elements, okay, it's going to be water for sure, not air and stuff like that. Water. Okay? And you have your three water signs. The most watery of the water signs, I would say, Pisces is your sign of fantasy. You can look at Cancer. You can look at Scorpio. They're both water signs. Pisces, remember last week with BTK? Pisces. really stuck out as a fantasy-driven thing for him. Not to mention Neptune, which rules Pisces. So that's water too, right? So we have Dennis Rader, who had the Sun and Mercury in Pisces. Fantasy, good, off to a great start. We need that fantasy. He also had Mercury opposite Neptune. Interesting for the fantasy, because that throws him. It's not a good fantasy where you're going to make a cartoon for kids for the Sunday show. This is a weird fantasy, right? It's got some problems, maybe. Mercury opposite Neptune for fantasy in law. And remember, it was part of a T-square last week. Mercury opposite Neptune, both of them square Saturn in the 12th house. That was his paraphilia, strangling people, his whole problem. Everything about the BTK was in Mercury, opposite Neptune, square Saturn. That was the BTK's MO right there. Even includes his methodicalness and stuff like that from the Mercury-Saturn thing, right? So let's go over to Russell. He's also fantasy equal. Well, Dennis Rader's born on March 9. He's a Pisces. Russell is born on March 7, 2 days difference. He's also a Pisces. That doesn't mean much, by the way. Don't go by sun sign. Remember, we're not that 98% here. Okay? But it does bring up water, okay, which we need. And it does bring up fantasy. So what's the deal? Well, with Russell, let's see, the Sun conjunct Jupiter. That's the executive thing. Reaching for higher goals, his loftier goals. How about commander of the world of Canada's largest Air Force base? I keep going to say the world. My God. Canada's largest Air Force base. So there, that's in tune with him. Look, Mercury conjunct Jupiter in Pisces. They thought he was living in a fantasy world when he saw Top Gun, but he went for it and he became Top Gun. That's Mercury conjunct Saturn for the steadfastness of mental mind and purpose. And the lofty fantasy of, but realistic, yeah, he did become it. Sun conjunct Jupiter in Pisces, the fantasy oriented, right? So that's for his profession. Okay, his crimes are going to come out a little differently. That's also fantasy oriented, so we can't forget about that. Fantasy is going to play a big role with this dude. But we get to see it. Sun conjunct Jupiter. So he's got loftier fantasies than Rader. Rader had Sun conjunct Mercury in Pisces. Williams, Sun conjunct Jupiter, the higher executive. You can already see the professionalism on the one hand and the more regular on the other, right? So it's in keeping with reality, who they actually were. That's important, right? Because, right, obviously. But you know what I mean. Okay, onward. Let's keep going. So we got the fantasy thing going here. They both did photography big time. They both wanted to relive that fantasy, relive the fantasy. We don't want to go too much on memento here. You know, trophies. I think, I guess that'd be the word I should be using. Trophy. Trophies, yes, he did keep trophies, right? But more importantly than the word trophy, which would be Saturn. Saturn restricts, keeps, holds in. Remember? Saturn restricts the body. Saturn restricts the air for strangulation. Saturn rules all of that, even rules rope. Strangulation. They are both strangulars, by the way. That's going to come into it. In this case, we're looking at people who are taking things to relive their fantasy. It's more fantasy than trophy. That's what I mean. Things can be, you have to be very careful about what words you're choosing here. I want to stick to fantasy, not so much trophy. You can't really go by stuff. That's the same with the DSM with the psychiatry and stuff. I think it's the DSM, right? I think I gave away my book. I had it. It actually throws you off. It doesn't help you really much in criminal profiling. It can really throw you off because it's so based on stats. Stats are of no use to us. Remember? So, you know, he's doing this and that, and you look it up in the DSM, his behavior, you go, probably a sadist. Look up something else. He's probably this. And you go to a court case and you listen to psychiatrists. No offense to psychiatrists, but on one hand, you can have two psychiatrists over here, two psychiatrists over there. This one says, oh, he's a narcissist and this and that. This guy says he's a paranoid schizophrenic. This one over here says he's psychotic. He's a sociopath. The next one says something totally different. You have four people saying four different things. Now, that doesn't mean they're all wrong. He might have traits of all four. What I'm saying is that's not good for profiling. That's not good for narrowing suspects. That's good for sitting on the couch and theorizing what could be. You don't do that in this case. When you're doing criminal profiling, you need concrete things to separate suspects. You don't want to send police to the wrong suspect because you looked up the wrong behavior. It's not useful. Sorry. Right? Maybe later when he's already captured, and you can go through and speculate what this guy's all suffering from and stuff like that. But don't use it for your criminal profiling too much because it could really throw you off. I was using it at first to look up things and stuff like that and finding it was just kind of throwing me off. There's too much information. There's too much speculation. It's based on statistics, which is really wrong for this kind of work. Okay, so take your DMN, toss it a bit. Don't rely too much on it. Okay, just because it's the book of psychiatry with the psychiatrist use. It doesn't mean it's going to help us in this situation. Maybe there are situations when they're dealing with other people and trying to help them, whatever. It's not good for criminal profiling, essentially, to narrow suspects. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I know. But anyway, so cross-dressing. They both cross-dressed. They both dressed up. This is always going along with the fantasy. So fetish, easy on the fetish. Go big on the fantasy. These guys are fantasy driven. So to take pictures, they want to relive their fantasy. They're not just keeping trophies here. They're not just ripping the ring off their finger going, I got something here. They will if they have to, if that's all they can get. These people are focused on that too. Granted, Rader was a kind of a copycat. He was stealing radios. He stole a radio from the Otero family because a radio was stolen in some book called In Cold Blood. Remember that? That's true. He wasn't very original, but we're not going to get too much into that, all right? I don't care about that. He's fantasy driven. That's the important thing, okay? And his fantasy stuff isn't about radios. He's not always stealing radios. He just did that because of a book. He's after pictures and reliving fantasies, and he needed to do that so badly he dressed up himself and put on that girl's mask with a wig, and so he could relive the fantasy of how he would imagine a girl being in that position. And Williams is doing the same. If you look at his pictures, you will see the expression on his face. He's not with us, kind of. He's in a different world. And he's in two unique worlds at the same time. The only way to really know that is to be a profiler, is to put yourself in his situation. And that may even having to include going out, getting some women clothes that you feel are really attractive if you're a male. Go to your Goodwill, get some women's clothes, but dress her up the total part of a woman. Take pictures of yourself, do it surreptitiously so there's a bit of danger involved, just like Williams likes, as we will see later. And play it out and see how you feel. Look at your pictures. What's the expression on your face? Right? What are you thinking? How are you feeling if you're trying to be Williams? If you're trying to be Rader? It's fantasy, man. It's not just trophies. Trophies is Saturn. We're not after Saturn. Saturn's the opposite. That's actually a bad word for us with these two guys. It's fantasy or fetish. Even fetish is better than trophy. Okay, so don't use the word trophy with these two guys, is what I'm trying to say. That's why I'm saying it. They aren't after trophies. They're after items they can use to fantasize about later and relive the whole thing with, right? For sexual reasons. And you can see the look on William. You know, these guys are so serious. Eh? Well, both of them are. Look at unfortunately, Rader wears a mask a lot of times. You can't see that serious expression of his. But they also have that serious expression because of Mercury and Saturn. Remember the communication? Their face is communicating to you what's going on. So their faces communicate. Well, for Russell, it communicates Mercury conjunct Saturn. That's called poker face. No expression, just dead. Dead is Saturn, by the way. Death. That's a planet of death. So he has the face of death, kind of. Right? He's stoic, no emotion, everything held in tight. Saturn. Same with Rader. Take a look at that face. That's Mercury opposite. Oh, no, sorry. Mercury square Saturn. So they both got Mercury square Saturn faces. Rader might be a bit more twisted. Might see something more twisted in his face, where Williams would might be straight out. Nothing. Just cold. Just straight out like an arrow. Where Rader you might see a little bit of madness behind that eye because it's not as sturdy. Mercury square Saturn. See how you can use it for communication? Your face is communicating. They're communicating Saturn through their face. So when you're looking for a suspect, who's got the Saturn face? You see how you can do a suspect if they're standing in a room and they're all like doing, and you pick out a couple of people and you say, look at that face, look at that guy's face. Take these two guys. I want to look into these two guys because of their face. Just because of that face. You know, and that's actually how we could do it using astrology. They have Saturn faces. They're communicating to us. Now, granted, Williams in these pictures is in two different worlds at the same time. Okay? He's folded over, so he's not seeing his face at all. Those pictures, it's not about him being. His face is not even part of it. He's in two different places at the same time and doing a fantasy thing. He's in the throes of fantasy right now in those pictures, right? You wouldn't know it because it's all going on in here. It's cerebral, but it's water to begin with. It's fantasy oriented, and that in turn affects the mental mind. So that's just as an aside. Okay, so the number of victims. Okay, so they're fantasy driven. They both do dress up, role playing. That's all fantasy. We have that. We already know Pisces, right? That's your Pisces. And with Dennis Rader, it's a bit more twisted, a little bit more twisted, as you can see, because of Mercury opposite Neptune, which is deception and things like that, and weirdness and mystery. It's kind of creepy. Okay, that's Mercury opposite Neptune. That's why Dennis Rader is a little more creepy, actually, in truth, than Williams. Okay, Williams has something different going on. He has Saturn square Neptune. They both have Saturn square Neptune, by the way. Okay, that's interesting. Saturn square Neptune is sort of the paraphilia for both of them. Because remember the paraphilia, we talked about Saturn square Neptune is the paraphilia for Rader. Well, if you look over at Williams, he's also got a paraphilia, right? Similar. There were so many similarities between these guys. Look what he's got, Saturn square Neptune. They both have it. The odds are tremendous. Okay, I don't have Saturn squared. I don't have none of this stuff. My charts are unique. You can do the charts of the quintuplets, and you'd have 5 unique charts. There are no 2 charts alike when you have the time of birth. Okay, there are no 2 charts alike, even for twins. Similarities, obviously, just like there are in real life, but different. So here you go, Saturn square Neptune for both. Okay, they both share that. That's a big thing. So you can study that on your own, looking up the planets' meanings and stuff, going along, and looking up Neptune. You get to know Neptune through the words and stuff like that. That's a fantasy planet, kind of. Your intuition and all that, and imagination and paraphilia, sexual conditioning. The conditioning part, of course, with the Saturn included. So for him, where's Saturn, man? Aquarius. Society. We don't know what house it's in. No idea. Doesn't matter. We got him. Neptune in Scorpio. Sex. Death. Oh boy. Yeah, he did take it to there. Bit of sexual stuff going on there. That's more sex-oriented, direct. Sex. Just straight out. Sex. Okay. A little bit of problem there with his paraphilia. He's got a sex problem there. So, but Rader's sex is different. He's got Saturn in the 12th house. Remember the subcontinent? That was part of the T-square. In Cancer, that's at more fantasy water. But it's more familial. So it's more, it's a little different. It rules things that are closer to him. More personal, family and personal that he bonds with. As we know, he bonded with that when he was young. It was all Cancer. His mom got caught with her ring and stuff like that. He started fantasizing, blah, 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 family. And it all kind of stemmed from that, like personal stuff, right? His Neptune was in Libra. Ooh, not good. So here he turned to more to the law and stuff like that. And that's in the third house. It's a local travel that he's killing locally. Yeah, that's from last week. We don't want to go over all that again. But that's that T-square from last week if you want to go back. I don't want to get back into that, though. So, for Williams, he has Saturn in society, who he does pick people just randomly out of society. He does. And we have no idea where that house is. That's a shame, eh? But it is square to Neptune, that fantasy, that paraphilia, and the paraphilia, Neptune and Scorpio. This is straight out sex. It's not warped like Dennis Rader. This is warped, right? Mercury opposite Neptune, both square Saturn. So it's part of a T-square. That Saturn square Neptune for Rader is more complicated, okay? Because of Mercury opposite Neptune, both square Saturn, all three of them working together. That's from last week. So you can see the complicated stuff there. It's getting weirder, right? More creepier. From Neptune. Not so creepy with this dude. Straight out sex, paraphilia. Okay? That's the difference between the two. Saturn, square Neptune. Okay? And Saturn is conjunct Mercury. Not so twisted. Okay? Now, with the moon, he does have the moon's opposite Saturn and the moon square Neptune. That's going to play a role in inspiring this guy a lot more than Rader. You know, Rader could go years and years and not murder anybody, right? And that's one of the things. His moon is sextile Sun, trine Jupiter. Yeah. It's okay. His Venus was in Aries. Remember, his Venus was really well aspected in Aries. Venus sextile Saturn. Solid relationship guy. Sticks with the wife through the whole thing. Murdering on the side. But you can see the fixation there. He's steadfast. Okay, well, Russell is steadfast in everything he does. He's just a steadfast guy all around. Okay. And yeah. Okay, let's continue for a sec here. I wanted to strangulation. Okay, so we both got the fantasy thing out of the way. Okay, good? Good. They're both total fantasy. Okay. Saturn square Neptune, nothing really interfering except the moon is there. The moon is also square Neptune. So that's a bit of strangeness there. You know? But he's actually kind of a moon guy. I know a lot of people like to knock that the full moon doesn't have an effect or anything like that. That's BS. Right? This guy's affected. Okay. So he's going to be a little bit more... This is why Rader was able to hold on to himself for years and just use his fantasy stuff that he stole and making pictures of himself dressing up as his victims. He was able to do that and focus on his family and raise his family, which he did a good job on. Williams, no children, didn't want any. Same with his wife, I guess. But my God, is much less stable. His emotions, although they're held private because of Mercury conjunct Saturn, you're not going to know about his emotions. He's not going to tell you because his communication has been shut off completely by Saturn. Okay, with a conjunction. Moon square opposite Saturn, Moon square Neptune, Moon in Leo of romance and women, square Neptune in Scorpio. There's something to do with women he's attracted to. He wants them. He wants to get the girl, the Top Gun guy. He actually does. He can't because he's Russell Williams, and who wants to date Russell Williams? I'm surprised anybody married that dude. But anyway, like marrying an ice cube. But whatever. He got married, and there's somebody for everybody. He's got a more straight out sex romance thing, so that's why he's attracted to the women a little bit differently than Rader, and not just looking to choke them out. He wants to have sex with them. He wants a romance that he's never going to have with a beautiful woman, which he ain't going to get. Sorry to his wife or whatever, but if we're going to go for like cosmopolitan looks, she didn't have it. In the movie they made of his life, they gave her a model. It's funny. But and a different color hair. Whatever. Okay, strangulation is both of their primary weapons. We already know that. Mercury conjunct Saturn, Mercury square Saturn for Rader. Mercury conjunct Saturn. Saturn is strangulation, right? Asphyxiation, restriction of the body, it's bondage, it's all of those things that restrict and hold tight. It's trophies. He doesn't collect trophies. I just want to reiterate that. It's fantasy. But, okay, so there you go, right? So that's right out of the way right away. Strangulation is their primary weapon, obviously. Their Mercury mind is connected to strangulation. Strangulation is Saturn, right? In rope, you learned last week. Okay, that's what it rules. Look at your meanings in your correspondences for Saturn just for a sec. What does it mean? For the various correspondences, sadness, depression, math, calculating, strangulation. Need I say more? I guess that we can stop there. Hostage, suffocation, hanging, sociopathy, coldness, apathetic, bones, dentures, old people, father, funerals, policemen, abduction. See also Mars, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, his mental mind, both of their mental minds are connected to Saturn. It's not surprising they would choose that method because well, definitely for Rader, his Mars is not that out of control. He's got the control and stuff. And there's a bit of awkwardness with his violence. His Mars opposite Pluto, there's a bit of controllingness there. There's some control issues there, but it's not connected to his paraphilia. So it's not connected really to the crimes. It's kind of, he's able to separate it, right? It's not tied in with that T-square, or that would be a big problem. He would be a totally different guy. If that was the case, a totally different killer too. Williams is a little more violent. He's got Venus opposite Mars. Ooh, he could have a little repressed anger there towards women. Yeah, he didn't go out with another girl for 10 years. He's got Venus, the planet of courtships and attraction, opposite Mars, the planet of war and aggression. And keep in mind, he clubbed those women with a flashlight. Flashlight. I don't get it. I didn't know they were so strong, man. I don't know. It must be a good flashlight with Duracell. But yeah, he's clubbing them to submission. He's more violent, physical than Rader. This is important for us too, because that's 100%. He fractured the skull of his last victim before strangling her, right? Clubbed her over the head and fractured her skull, then strangled her because she wasn't dead yet. That was actually a really sad moment when he had her thinking that she was going to be free and taken home. She was smiling on the camera, and then he got her dressed, was leading her toward the door, came up behind her. That's actually really sad, actually, that happened. But anyway, strangulation. So we have a guy, they both use, so one uses rope, bags, knife as a backup, gun for control. That's Rader. And he only used a knife once because he was forced to, because of time restriction. Remember that kid, Kevin, the brother, got shot twice. He shot him twice in the head and he was still living and ran out in the street. So yeah, he had to off his victim really fast there, so he couldn't do what he wanted, and that was strangulation. Okay, so he brought his kill kit, whatever, his his hit kit. Williams, he brought rope, vinyl ties, duct tape, flashlight, knife, used also to cut off clothes. I'm not sure if Rader did that, but I don't think he did, but he might have, I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't remember reading that. Pry windows and screens off, different things like that. He took a pillowcase from a resident. He also used pillowcases, tied it around them, stuff like that. And then he would take the pillowcase, so they couldn't use it for evidence. So they both have this bondage thing going on to tie them up. That goes with the strangulation, bondage, and Saturn. So there's a focus on Saturn. That's what we would do. 100% focus on Saturn. Okay, number of victims. Rader, 10 murders, 7 adult women, 1 male adult, 1 female child, 1 male child, blah, blah, blah. And that was over a period of 17 years. Okay? First murder, 74. Last murder, 1991. Took 31 plus years to capture him. Okay. Rader goes from breaking into places. He broke into like 80-something places. We'll get to that. Only stealing underwear and stuff like that. All their underwear. He wouldn't just take a couple of his favorite paint. Just empty the whole drawer out. Just take it. They come home. There's nothing. No lingerie, no sex toys in some cases. He would take all that. And then he would spend an inordinate amount of time in some of these places. Okay? That's another thing about that guy. Steadfast. Just didn't even, he... Anyway. There was only 2 murders by Williams. Dennis Rader was out to kill them in the first place. That was his purpose, to kill them. Williams started out stealing underwear and stuff. Then he escalated very quickly. Within 2 years, he's just breaking and entering and stealing underwear. 2 years later, he's got 2 murders under his belt. He escalates very fast within 2 years that we know of. Okay? So the 2 murders are the last ones, obviously. He's escalating. He starts off with 2 sexual assaults, ties them up, hits them, photographs them in every position for his fantasy. They are both taking a lot of pictures for fantasy. That's Pisces, right? And they both have a strong Neptune, which rules your cameras and stuff for fantasy reasons, right? Although Russell also tended to take a lot of pictures of landscapes, and he just liked the camera too. But I don't think he was into different types of cameras. He just had the one camera, so we're not going to go overboard on that and use it just strictly for his paraphilia. Okay. Victimology. Rader preferred younger, attractive women. Easier to control if they were petite, especially younger, attractive. Examples of 2 victims were Annette Funicello when he was young from the Mickey Mouse Club. That's from his adolescence and stuff. He used to watch the Mickey Mouse Club. He liked Annette Funicello. She was a brunette. And when he got older, he liked Nancy Fox a lot. I think that was his 7th victim. And his favorite one, too. She was a lighter-haired and petite. Lived in that little pink house. But he liked her for her petiteness and attractiveness. See, but 2 different hair colors. Victims were chosen randomly and marked as projects. What's with Rader, right? Which consisted of first trolling and stalking, Rader's wording, the victim, collecting data and stuff like this. He thought he was so good at collecting data and so accurate and so meticulous. And that's self-delusion. Mercury opposite Neptune, remember? Self-deluded. Remember the first crimes of the four Otero families? He didn't know they had a dog, didn't know the father was home, didn't know there was 2 brothers and a sister, I guess, also at school. Didn't know about them. He wasn't as meticulous. He was clumsy and self-deluded in many ways. So he got lucky in a lot of ways when he did his crimes. Russell was, no. Mercury conjunct Saturn, much better at it. Okay? Both of these guys... Rader would go through and break into the home before he would murder them, try to find out about them, read their mail, stuff like that. He would do that, but he was just clumsier. He also showed signs of compassion, very important. Rader showed signs of compassion to his victims. He loosened binds, even in the first murders. He loosened binds, took the bag off the kid's head when the mother woke up at her pleading, right? And did all sorts of things and he used the word comfort over and over in his videos. He's always talking about how he comforts them. He uses the gun to control them, keep the stress levels down. He'd lie to them and say, this is a robbery. I know California's after me and I just need a car and some money. He just to calm them down and to comfort them a little, as he would say. Whatever. But yeah, he actually showed more compassion than a lot of killers do. See, he was kind of a compassionate killer in a sense. Still going there to kill. That's his job in a sense. He's made it his job to kill. But he's going to show signs of compassion. Okay, so he kept various items for his fantasies. We can, if you want to call them trophies for the moment, they're not really trophies. I guess they could be called trophies because trophies are also used for reliving fantasies. But whatever. He took items, pictures, licenses, etc., kept meticulous records. Mercury square Saturn. Remember Saturn keeping records, meticulous. Okay, he began changing his MO to throw off police. Remember, he went to school for that just to become a better serial killer. He started changing up his MO and stuff like that. And Sun opposite Jupiter would help him to do that. Mercury is opposite Jupiter, which would help him to do that. And Mercury is opposite Neptune, which would help him to do that. Otherwise, if he didn't have those and just had Mercury square Saturn, he wouldn't have done that. He wouldn't have probably changed up. All right? Not likely. Okay? Okay, so for Williams, he preferred younger women also. They all generally do. Late teens to early 30s, unknown body types, I'm not really sure. He targeted girls as young as 12 to steal their underwear and was later found to possess some child porn on his computer. He got really upset at that and said, I'll tell you anything, just keep that out of the courts. He did not want that discussed. As soon as children were brought up, he's like, oh, okay, that is Sun conjunct Jupiter. Jupiter is your morals and stuff like that. He did not want that brought up. So he was willing to trade information to keep that pedophilia stuff out of there. He's not a pedophile, but pedophilic pictures or whatever of children, right? As young as 12. But he did steal their underwear and stuff, not from their clothesline. He broke in and spent like 2 and 3 hours in a home, taking pictures of himself dressed up or laying it out on the bed, meticulous order. Everything's meticulous. Remember, Mercury conjunct Saturn. Everything's meticulous. So he's laying out the clothes in perfect lines. Then he's rolling around there, sniffing them, licking them. Gets a bit intense. Ooh, that's his paraphilia, his sexual stuff coming out. A bit warped. That is your moon square Neptune. Okay, moon square Neptune. That's where that's where the weird stuff comes in. Okay, if you're wondering, his thing was being thrilled. He was a thrill killer. Okay. He chose his victims randomly, just like Rader. When they saw something they liked, they just honed in on it, and that was it. It was theirs. And of course, Williams was gutsy. He'd go back to the same place 2 and 3 times. He actually sexually assaulted a lady one night and tried to go back the next night after sexually assaulting her, but the husband was already home, so he had to go back another night. But he did go back, I think 1 or 2 times. Went back and took a picture of her license. The same place he went in and sexually they tied her up and took pictures. He didn't actually rape her. He didn't rape until the last 2 murders, right? So here they were random victims. He did a wider area, though. His victims lived as much as 150 miles away because he's traveling down this highway for his job and stuff. So he'll focus in on somebody. Next time he's going by, he'll stop in. Sometimes one time he's after the murder, or when he was going to do the murder, and he's on his way home. He stops into a couple places, does a couple of break and enters. He's always break and entering, like 80-something times. He's like, right in his neighbors too. Gutsy. He was a thrill guy. This is another thing we're going to get into. Okay. So his fetish break-ins were mainly in the area in which he lived, including neighbors, so especially around his cottage in Tweed. Okay, so that is similar to Dennis Rader in a sense, but not so much. I didn't really play that out too much because he did do things 150 miles away, just wherever he happened to be. I imagine Rader would do the same, but he didn't travel that far for work, right? So that's probably the only reason. Otherwise, he would have done something 150 miles away. So he was known to break in mainly on weekends, late at night, and been known to steal upwards of 182 clothing items from a single home. That's what I was saying. He's just emptying their drawer and throwing in a bag and running off like a Santa Claus with a big sack of underwear and bras and sex toys and whatever else, lingerie, whatever. Known to break into more than one home on a single night. Okay? He showed signs of compassion to victims, such as reassurances that no harm will come to them. The first victim, she had that one with the little baby. She had a little baby. And he apologized to another for hitting her and got her and fetching an aspirin for them. Sorry about hitting you and stuff. There's a little bit of compassion. They do show compassion to their victims. Okay? I know they kill them and stuff, but they are compassionate killers. Okay? So they show compassion. There's no doubt. That is Sun conjunct Jupiter for Williams. Okay? If you want to look that up. And it's Sun opposite Jupiter for Dennis Rader. Also the fact that they have a lot of water. And water's empathetic. So, of course, Dennis Rader has Sun and Mercury in Pisces, and Williams has Sun and Jupiter in Pisces. So there's your more empathy coming through. Okay, so it's not surprising with that much water and with Jupiter playing like that. It's not surprising they should show moments of compassion. Okay, and that can set them apart from other murderers around the world where there's no compassion. And so hitting him on the head, of course, we've already covered that. Venus opposite Mars, more physical. It could be a little bit of repressed anger there for Russell Williams. Okay? So he's more physical than Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader doesn't punch him around and stuff like that and hit him over the head with flashlights. So let's see. He kept trophies as well. We'll call them trophies for the moment. Various items, pictures, bras, panties, lingerie, dildos. This is totally fantasy, not really trophy. Fantasy. Focus on fantasy. Okay? Pisces and Neptune, stuff like that. Saturn square Neptune. That's their paraphilia, remember? He kept voluminous and detailed and meticulous victimology records. So he'd come home with a sack full of underwear, lay them out, and get on the computer and say, one pink pair of undies like this from this address, one pink, and he'd go through all the items and meticulously put it in a spreadsheet. Literally. And his films and his pictures were all meticulously recorded, just like Dennis Rader. That is Mercury conjunct Saturn, and for Rader, Mercury square Saturn. Okay? So we could keep coming back to those planets. I want to get you used to them. You can see the similarities of these two killers. It's just jumping right out, right? Okay, 10 minutes. We only have 20 minutes, so let's do this. So he has sexual assault only. He did a 20-year-old. That was his first victim. And the other one was 46. It was out of his age range, chosen for convenience. People who know true crime know that is not unusual. Convenience often plays a big role in true crime. They happen to be there. They can take advantage of the situation. They take it, man. They take the opportunity. Doesn't mean they're opportunists. They're not. These are not opportunistic killers. They're opposite to opportunistic killers, for sure. A little less. Russell's a little more opportunistic. Oh no, a little more opportunistic than Rader. And I'll get back to that. Remember I mentioned that. His opportunity stuff coming up. Because there's something about that we want to look into. His murder victims were 37 and 27. The first one out of his age range again, but he knew her from work. And he honed in on her, and that was that. He could look up information with her on the computer, knows where she lives, knows her boyfriend, gets to know her, stuff like that. Remember, he's also, much like Rader, he's also honing in on his victims, breaking in before he murders them, just like Rader. He breaks into their homes and checks them out, gets his notes. He does reconnaissance. Is that the reconnaissance? Instead of saying stalking or trolling, we'll say reconnaissance for Rader, army talk. Same thing as Rader. They both do it. Mercury square Saturn for Rader, for reconnaissance. For Russell Williams, Mercury conjunct Saturn. Same thing, meticulous records, reconnaissance, careful planning, meticulous. Right. Goes along with it. Okay. So, what do we got here? Okay. So he's killed them, his victims. The second victim, 27, he saw her. That was it. He just honed in on her. And noticed that she might live alone. Well, he went back there and checked out her place, broke in there, I think. But break and enters for the crimes not involving physical contact with victims. We have Rader, who does do a few break and enters and thefts that focus primarily on his fantasy stuff, his fetish stuff, underwear, bras, lingerie, just like Williams. There's the break and enters, which also include reconnaissance in order to gather info on a target. Both of them, again, Mercury conjunct Saturn, Mercury square Saturn, for their Mercury in Saturns, right? Total number of break-ins for Rader is unknown. I don't really know the exact number of places he broke into, but didn't hurt anyone and just wanted to get information on the person he was targeting. He did that a lot and then didn't murder them because it just didn't work out. He had 55 targets at the time he got arrested. So he'd probably been breaking into places, but it just didn't work out that anyone was there that he could murder and strangle. Okay, so for Williams is different. 82 known break and enters, 82, most prior to the sexual assaults and murders, which would often involve remaining at the residence for extended periods of time, 2+ hours, sometimes 3 hours. He would stay at a place, taking pictures of himself dressed up, doing this fantasy thing, masturbating, and so on and so forth. Okay. No break and enters. Okay. So yeah, tons of break. Remember, this all happened after he became commander. That we know of. The recorded time of his crimes for Williams is after he became commander in 2007, was it? So he gets the big Top Gun job and starts breaking in, and then sexually assaulting and then murdering. Within 2 years, he's done it all. 82 known break and enters for underwear and stuff and fetish stuff. Sometimes he would strip naked. He has also broken into at least one residence pre-stripped down, naked, breaking in for the thrill. Lay out underwear neatly on the bed where he would photograph and film the items. We talked about that. There's something here. He is a thrill. There's something that differs between these two guys in a big, big way. Thrill, excitement, danger, risk-taking. Dennis Rader has 0% that. He doesn't want nothing to do with that, man. Okay? Totally nothing to do with that. That would be the last thing on his agenda. Russell's is part of his MO. What's the difference? What rules that kind of stuff? Risk-taking and, well, you have Aries. I'll say there is Aries, which is daring and adventuresome and stuff like that. And, of course, Sagittarius for a different sort of adventuresome. But Aries for the daredevil stuff and race car drivers. But there's one that's risk-taking, that's chaotic and sort of offbeat. And plays a big role in a lot of serial killers' charts. Okay? I want you to look up the general meanings of Uranus. Right here. Unique, erratic, unpredictable, explosive, fanatical, unconventional, futuristic. Uranus. Now, various correspondences. Let's look up that. Where's my various correspondences for Uranus? Right here. Bombs, reckless, sudden changes of mood or behavior, fickle, unique, sparkling, indifference, ingenious, spontaneous, opportunistic, chemicals. Okay? This guy is a big risk taker. Spontaneous, he craved the excitement of breaking in. That's something that Dennis Rader was going there for a purpose, a very serious purpose. That's a big difference between these two dudes. Okay? Mercury opposite Uranus for Russell Williams. Mercury opposite Uranus. Look at the mindset. He's craving adventure, stimulation. He can't really get it because he's also really boring and nobody wants to date him probably. Mercury conjunct Saturn. I mean, in his personality is kind of like flat, like a pancake. So there's not a lot of excitement. He's not getting the girls like he'd like. He's got some problems, right? Sex problems. So things aren't really working out for the dude. Excitement, breaking into a place already nude, doesn't it? And once he breaks into a place totally nude, the girl's in the shower. He's standing outside the shower. He sees the clothes there on the floor, or wherever she's put them, that she took off to go in the shower. He was going to steal them and thought, no, I better not do that. His common sense breaks in. Mercury conjunct Saturn. Thank God for that. And, for him, he goes into her room, steals some clothes from there, and then leaves while she's in the shower. But think of the thrill that he's getting. He's a thrill seeker. That's his difference from Rader. That's his primary difference. Dennis Rader has no thrill going on with Uranus. He only has Uranus trine Neptune, meaningless, for the true crime stuff here. These are two slow-moving planets. Uranus, sextile Pluto. This is all generational, has nothing to do with this crime. It's two slow-moving planets. They're too generational. It's actually Williams. Mercury opposite Uranus. That's also his downfall. It's an opposition. You remember how Dennis Rader had the narcissism that was too over the top and he's like communicating. He's going too far. He can't hold back that Mercury square Saturn. You know what I mean? He can't hold it steady and keep himself in line. In some cases when they're attacking his narcissism, that's Sun opposite Jupiter, right? Well, in this case, Mercury opposite Uranus. He's really pushing the thrills and he's making big errors. Spontaneous is the key word there. Spontaneous, leaping before looking in certain cases. And that's what he did. He's parking his car right where he's doing the murder. And that's how he gets nailed. Tire tracks, footprints everywhere. He wears the same shoes to the interrogation room. Right? So there's his downfall. It's that erraticness that he's able to hold off in most cases with Mercury conjunct Saturn. But when the moon strikes him and the mood strikes strong, that's moon square Neptune. When things get weird and that he's overrun with that impulse and he's ready to let loose. Now that he's commander, he's thinks he's all that. He's actually taking massive risks. He's starting to see himself as they'll never catch me. Like, I'm the commander. So it's gone too far. That's his narcissism playing a bit. But the moon square Neptune, where the weird things come in, he's got to do what he's got to do. Then Mercury opposite Uranus. Risk-taking, doing the thrills, walking around naked, going through windows into homes where people are there already naked. That's thrill-seeking. So he's a big thrill seeker. That's the difference between the two. Rader, he had been gone. He thought, when he saw Kevin running down the street with a hole in his head, he's like, the police are coming. Stabs the victim, can't even strangle them. He's gone. He's also very cautious, he doesn't want to get caught. That's why he goes 7 years without murdering people, 4 years without murdering people, 3. He'll do his fantasies at home and then go out. He's much more careful. The recklessness of Williams takes over. And there you've got the difference, the primary difference. We have 10 minutes. So you can study these two people, study those things we've been talking about, the Mercury, the Saturn, the fantasy, and the recklessness of Mercury opposite Uranus. Okay? You've kind of got them in a nutshell right there, the crimes and stuff. If you're looking for the sex problems, you've got Moon in Leo, square Neptune in Scorpio, which rules sex and stuff. So you can see he wants to have a girl he's got sex problems. Like say, so his wife is very conservative. If you've watched the documentary, she's not going to play around with the stuff that he wants to play around with. Okay? The bondage, and he wants to have fun and excitement sexually. I don't think she'd be a very sexually exciting person, so I'd imagine he went out and got his thrills other places. He's also very private, even to his wife. He's a very private person. Okay. Let's see. So he does weird things, sniffing and licking items, draping them over, total fantasy stuff. That gets a bit weird there. Not like Rader, a different way with the strangulation. Focus. Remember? Mercury opposite Neptune, square Saturn, focus on strangulation with the, for the T-square for Rader from last week. Williams, same thing, but unique. Of course, everybody's individual. And you can see by the individual chart how it comes out, right? So he's doing a little bit weird things like licking underwear and stuff like that. This is the moon, okay? The moon in Leo, which is romance and stuff. Square Neptune gets weird, okay? Deception and creepiness, and that's over to Neptune in Scorpio. So the sex act, okay? There was also more with Scorpio. Who else? Saturn square Neptune. That's just paraphilia is trapped in there too, okay? So there's no T-square going on with Williams, like we had with Rader, like from last week, with the Mercury opposite Neptune and both square Saturn. With him, it's separate. He's got his paraphilia, Saturn square Neptune, right? That's his paraphilia sex thing there, his fantasy thing. That's where the strangulation as well, too, as well as Mercury conjunct Saturn, the two of them making it strong, making it real. Neptune plays the major role, okay? Neptune is the major player. Neptune in Scorpio, sex. So sex is the major player. So he's kind of got a sex thing going on here. He wants excitement. Mercury opposite Uranus. He wears women's undergarments at work when he's the commander. He's got underwear on under his uniform. So he's secretly having these sexual thrills. Thrills is the key word. Mercury opposite Uranus. Does Rader do that? Probably not. Does he wear his undergarments to work? No. He actually dresses up very regimental. He buffs his shoes like he's in the army just to go to church. That's what his daughter said. So there's differences, and you can see the differences in the chart. You can see it sticking out like a sore thumb. Not a coincidence, okay? We can do this 1,000 times. Very powerful. Down to 7 minutes, people. Okay, so I think we got most of it here. You can kind of read up on it on your own. The risk-taking, we've covered that some of the most, for the most part, Rader's and Williams differ in the way that Williams sought extreme risk-taking and excitement in his break-ins. Rader remained cautious with a singular focus for what he required for his bondage fantasies. Rader was compelled to break into homes because his targets are not going to come to him. He has no choice. Rader wouldn't mind if somebody came to him and he could do the suffocation on him at home. He doesn't want to go out there and do risky things. He has to. So that's why he's meticulous about it. Russell doesn't want them coming to him. He wants to go to them. He wants some excitement there, okay? Okay. So that's a really big thing, okay? The panties, then the fetish thing, that's his Saturn square Neptune, fantasy stuff. He wants to keep a lot of stuff. That's Saturn playing a major role, keeping things. So did Rader. Rader also did that, kept a lot of meticulous notes, kept things for fantasies. Oh yeah, made his own fantasies where he could when he couldn't go out and murder. Okay, and that's about it. That's all I've covered. Because those are the most salient parts of the chart. They speak volumes. If you look at them carefully and look at the differences of what we've talked about, you're going to see two extreme differences, but yet so many things that are exactly alike. And their charts reflect it absolutely, perfectly. Already written down. You already had it written down. Okay. And you can delve a bit deeper into the Neptune thing, okay, for Saturn and Aquarius. We do not know the houses, so we can't go too far. But Saturn square Neptune is his paraphilia, so there's some strangulation stuff. But there it is in a nutshell. You've got the commander and Dennis Rader kind of separated but together, doing a lot of the same things with the photography, reliving the fantasy stuff, not just trophy. And we got 5 minutes. Anything else I want to get out of the way just in case? I don't really see anything here, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're done. So, cool. You can look through the chart a bit more and read a bit of stuff. Don't read too much into it that we haven't covered. Do you know what I mean? Like, go through and find those things. Remind yourself of the strangulation and look at the differences. One's are this big risk taker who loves the thrill of breaking into a place and the danger, the excitement. His heart must be going. Plus, it's sexual. He prefers. They did find some pornography, some young women in pornography, but he's not a pedophile. Okay. Neither was Jeffrey Epstein. They weren't focused strictly on children. Okay. They did have some pedophilic tendencies and liked younger girls who were beyond the age limit, but we covered that last week, man. If Jeffrey Epstein was 14 and above, then like we said last week, if he's in certain countries, then that can be his wife. You always got to play with things very carefully because of laws. We make things up as people. So we start to think something's really bad in another country, it's really good, you know. So you got to be really careful of what kind of culture you're dealing with and stuff like that, what's going on around you. Start with nothing so that you can see everything. But hopefully that's enough that you can kind of look at the chart and say, wow, yeah, there's total differences in these two guys. You know, Williams is a little more violent. Venus opposite Mars. Could be a little anger there. He's having a hard time. He has a hard time with women, right? Mars is your male stamina. Remember? Libido. Remember the libido thing we talked about before with Epstein, with Mars? Venus is the planet of courtships and attractions. I have 3 minutes. I can do this. Well, there you go. There's Russell. Venus in Aquarius. He's got Venus opposite Mars. Has a hard time with women. He's a little bit awkward with the women. But he knows what he wants, and he wants to do like fun, exciting things, but he also wants a little bit of power over them and stuff. There is another thing with Williams. They both had oppositions to Pluto. Now, Rader had Mars opposite Pluto, which could throw a lot of people off if they weren't careful, because that can look like he's just going to slaughter people in true crime, because Pluto, it goes all the way. But it wasn't part of his paraphilia, and it was in control thanks to Saturn. Okay, so that was a trick. That was kind of a really scary part of Rader's chart, where people could trip over that and get a wrong interpretation. Remember, that's why you always know what you're looking for first, then go to the chart. Because we would have looked at the chart first, we would have gone right to Mars opposite Pluto. We would have jumped all over that. Meanwhile, we would have been in the wrong place in the chart. Simple as that. Mars is in Leo for Williams. Okay, that's romance and stuff. And so there could be a little, probably would be a little violence there off and on. Not, he struggles with, but his Mercury conjunct Saturn keeps him in line. He's got the Sun conjunct Jupiter, and he's a strong water sign. So it keeps him from being overly cruel and actually showing compassion at the same time as being not compassionate and murdering people. Okay? So they both show compassion because of Jupiter. Okay? In different ways. But he is a little more violent. He clubbed him a little more. That's Venus opposite Mars, by the way. That's the clubbing of the flashlight. Dennis Rader just wanted to control them, get the job done, strangle them, watch them, get that. That was his paraphilia, to watch them suffocate. Anyway, I hope you have a great week, and take care. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I just winged it, but I think we saw everything come out as pretty much as what we needed to see. And this is the idea. We're separating suspects. We needed that Saturn. We needed these qualities of personality because we had proof of it in William's case because of his job, etc., 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 right? And that all fit in with Saturn and stuff, plus his recklessness, his crazy recklessness and need for excitement and risk-taking to the extreme. That's extreme risk-taking. Mercury opposite Uranus is extreme risk-taking. It also got him caught. He didn't even think, he just jumps into it, parks the truck, leaves prints, leaves his shoe prints. Her footprints are going back to the last victim's, the vehicle, William's vehicle, because he spends 19 hours with her, raping her and stuff like that, which he did do, by the way. He did rape his victims. Hopefully, like I said, you watch documentaries. He did rape his victims because that's what he wanted. That's not Rader's thing. Rader is strictly strangulation. Williams, he wants more rape, he's a bit warped, okay, in that sort of a sexual way, but he just wants the sexuality. He even called one of his victims, baby, it's okay, baby, you're okay because she was this and that. He's calling her like these nice names and stuff like this, almost like they're borderline in a relationship. You can see where the fantasy's going here. He wishes he had that exciting sexual relationship that he's not getting with his wife. Sorry, obviously. He's not getting that. So that doesn't mean he wouldn't murder anyway, obviously. But he's craving that excitement, okay? He also has Venus in conjunct. Many of you will have noticed, we just don't have that kind of time. Venus, this is for Williams, Venus in conjunct Uranus. Sexual excitement, sudden and spontaneous and strong attractions to the opposite sex or to your sexual partner. Sudden and powerful attractions, more risk-taking, more suddenness and unexpected changes of mood or behavior, stuff like that. Well, he goes from nothing to double murder in 2 years. Okay, that's Uranus taking over, by the way. That's Uranus taking over. That 2 years of just breaking in the fetish thing, the excitement, all that, and the fetish thing, we know he's a fetish thing, to 2 years later, he's gone to murder, and in between 2 sexual assaults, and then to 2 murder. That 2 years, you can blame that primarily and almost completely on Uranus. Okay? Uranus is the planet that marks that. The weirdness and stuff like that. Moon square Neptune. Moon opposite Saturn. Okay, maybe he does struggle a little bit with depression or seriousness like that. Maybe he does have an air of loneliness. Who knows? I've gone 2 minutes over. Take care, and that's it. Okay, hope I covered everything. Okay, take care.